cream and sugar set. In this video, I'll show you an easy way to throw them on the wheel so you get them to fit together beautifully. I'm going to start with a lidded creamer dish. I'm going to center the clay to begin with. Once the clay is all nice and centered, then I'm going to cut off 1/3 of the clay, and that is what my lid is going to be. So as you see, I get this nice and centered here. And then once it's nice and centered, I'm going to take my pinky of my right hand and I'm going to pinch in 1/3 of that clay and cut it off. I'll show you right here. Got my pinky, I'm pressing in, grab that piece. Let's do it again. Press in with my pinky. There you go. You can see I cut off 1/3 of the clay and I set it to the side. That piece of clay will turn into the lid. So now I'm going to take the rest of the clay. I regrouped it and then brought it down to my hockey puck position. Now I'm going to open just like I would if I had just used all of the clay. Get it nice and open, making sure I have a bottom. Don't go too far down. And then get that nice and compressed. Now we're going to create our donut. You're going to use your left hand for this. You're going to put it in the C position. And then your right hand is going to keep that rim nice and supported. You're going to keep that same thickness all the way from the bottom to the top. This pull is great because you can move a lot of clay all at once. Then we're going to move over to the right side. We're going to press in and we're making that pull. If you watch my hands during this whole pull, I'm always supporting that rim. My left hand, either it's in between my thumb and my index finger, or I've got my thumb pressed against it. The entire time I'm throwing, I try to keep my rim in control. So right here, look how I've got my rim supported by my thumb and my index finger. Since this is going to be a matching set, we really want to watch our shape. As I'm making my pulls, I'm thinking about what shape is going to work best for the function of this pot. So it's going to be a sugar dish, and I know that I'm going to do a creamer also. What would be the best to hold a lot of cream and sugar? So I'm going to belly this out. I like a little fat bottom. It's going to hold a lot of sugar that way, and also you can get a spoon in there to dish it out. So I just kind of belly out this bottom. If I'm going to belly out the bottom of the sugar dish, then I want to belly out the bottom of the creamer also. So I keep that in mind so I can kind of figure out how the shape best fits both of the functions. So once I have the shape to how I would like it, this is when I'm going to work on my gallery. I need a gallery that is going to be deep enough for the lid to sit on and fit securely. We don't want it to wiggle around. So we're going to flare our rim a little bit. If your rim is straight up and down, chances are it's going to come in a little bit during that firing, and it's going to seal the lid and attach it to the pot. So we don't want that to happen. So we're going to flare it a little bit. Once we have it the way we like it, I'm going to measure and put my lid master in a safe spot so I don't accidentally bump it. Once this is done, I'm going to cut my piece off of the bat, and then I'm going to start right away on the lid. All right, now we can start the lid. Let's grab that little piece that we cut off of our clay when we were centering. It's not going to be a huge piece, and I can see right now that the piece that I have is too much, but it's better to be too much on the lid than too small. So we'll cut it off as soon as we make our pulls. So here I'm just centering that little bit of clay, and generally when you take it, so you cut it off, and that bottom where it cut from the rest of the clay, that is actually going to turn into the top. So the rounded piece on the top is now the bottom when you attach it to your bat. If you have any questions on that, feel free to message me and I'll explain it a little better, or I'll do a video on it. So once I have it nice and attached to the bat, it's centered, and then I just brought it down, my hockey puck position, and then compressing. So compress back and forth, get this nice and even, and then we're going to make just a little small pull. You make a little cylinder just like you would make anything else, and then you flare it out. So once I have that thickness that I want, I'm going to pull it out. Now on my sugar dishes, I don't like them too domed, so I lay it down a little flatter than I would if it was something that I wanted it more domed on. So I'm going to make your pull and then flare it out a little bit. And I like to use this little red rib, and that really helps to just kind of press it down evenly. So I use that and I just kind of lay it down. And if you look at my left hand is flipped upside down under the rim and it's supporting it. I'm trying not to touch the bat with that hand because we don't want it to grind down your nails either. And that will hurt if you do that too long. So keep your hand up a little bit, but lay the clay right across your hand. And that'll support it so it doesn't flop. Get this the shape that you like. What you'll want to do is check your size. So I can tell it's too big, but I'm going to take that lid master and I'm just going to measure it. That way I know how much I need to cut off. Now I'm going to take my pin tool and I'm going to be turning my wheel. Get the wheel going and then just kind of go in a little bit and then you just eyeball it. I'm just cutting off a little bit. Always go a little less than you think because you can take a little bit more off if you need to. If you accidentally took too much, you can make another pull and stretch that out or lay it down a little bit. That's not ideal, so I would prefer to take just a little bit off at a time. Then I'm going to regroup that rim. And then I'm going to measure it again to make sure it's going to fit. I want my lid to fit perfectly on anything that I'm making. I don't want any extra room. It shouldn't rattle around. It should fit snugly, but not so snug that it's hard to get on and off. So there we go. We got it measured. It looks like it's a good size. I'm going to clean up my bat and then I'll cut it off. Now I'm going to leave all of these on the bat for a couple of days until they dry to that leather hard stage. Then we'll work on getting them all nice and trimmed. Now that we have our sugar pot and its lid made, we're going to work on our creamer pitcher. With the creamer pitcher, I'm using just about the same amount of clay. I want this to be a little bit taller and skinnier, but similar to the sugar dish. Since it's a set, we do want them to look the same. So this piece I am also going to belly out. So here I am, I'm getting it nice and centered, concentrating on keeping my left hand very stable. I've got my elbow tucked into my body, and I've got that forearm really braced. So keeping that left hand as stable as I can, and then the right hand pulling. Left hand pushing away from me, right hand pulling towards me. Once most of that wiggle is out, then I can start coning up. I don't like to start coning until I've got it fairly centered. So once I've got that, I'll start coning up, keeping my hands wet. I don't want to have too much water, but I want enough that the clay is sliding across to my hands. If you have too much, you're weakening your clay. If you have too little, it will rip your clay in half. So there's definitely a happy medium with the water. Once you have that, you're going to bring it down into that hockey puck position, and then I'm going to open. So I'm going to use my middle finger of my right hand. My left hand will be on top of my right hand, and then both hands together working. I'm going to open up and then pull and create that nice bottom. Now I want to compress. I don't want any S cracks, so I want the bottom nice and even. So I'm going to go back and forth until it feels nice and even. Once I have that, I'm going to go directly in front of me and create that donut pull. My fingers of my left hand will be on the inside of my pot. My thumb will be on the outside. My right hand will be holding that rim but touching my left hand. Once the clay stops any movement, if it was shaking at all, you get it kind of nice and centered again, and then you go up. So I try to go up and inward I know that I want the neck of this to be beveled in a little bit. And so when I'm making all my pulls, I'm going to concentrate on making a cylinder that goes up and in. If your rim starts to flare out, it makes it a little more difficult to bring it in. So keeping it in at the very beginning will help you in the long run. So trying to keep that in, keeping my pulls nice and even, and concentrating on always keeping my rim in line. So I've got my cylinder here, and then I'm going to want to start shaping it. Since I know that my creamer dish has got the bellied out bottom, I'll be doing the same with this creamer. You can see that as I make the pull, I'm starting to kind of push out and get the shape. With my last pull, I generally will start shaping. So here I am, I've got a little bit of that shape going. I'm going to flare my rim a little bit. And you can tell that the shape isn't quite right, so that's when you go back in with your hand on the inside and press out anywhere that you want it to belly out more. So get it to the shape you want. And then also remembering, since this is a creamer pitcher and you're going to be pouring liquid out of it, the rim needs to be flared out just slightly so that it pours a little easier. So I try to bring that neck in a little bit here, and then I'm going to flare my rim a little bit. So you'll see right here, I'm liking this a little tighter of a neck. But then I ease off when I get up to the rim because I want it to have this nice vase shape. Just kind of cleaning up a little bit, anything that I don't like. And then here I am with pulling that rim out just ever so slightly. I want this to flow very nicely from the neck all the way to the bellied out bottom. For the spout, I'm taking my thumb and my middle finger, and I'm just creating a little pinch in it. I'm going to kind of pull up, and there, we created a spout. It was easy as that. I let our pieces dry for several days, and now it is time to trim. We're going to trim our cream and sugar dish. We're also going to throw a knob on our lid, and we're going to pull a handle for our creamer pitcher. My first step is to check to see how well my lid fits the pot. If it's too big, then you're going to want to trim it down. To trim it down, turn it upside down like this so that the bottom of it is connected to your Giffen grip, and then you're going to just trim that edge a little bit. So make sure you don't trim too much off, just do a little at a time, and then you'll want to check it again. So get a little trimming going, and you can tell I let this dry out more than I should have. So that's going to affect a little bit too. Since this is already shrunk more than the pot itself, since it's drier than the pot, I need to take that into consideration when I'm sizing it. So now it fits really nice. I'm going to flip it over. I'm going to trim off any excess clay that is on the top of this lid, and then we'll throw a handle. Or a knob, I should say. Be careful not to get it too thin. If you're having problems with the bottom of it caving in on you a little bit when you're throwing that knob, you can always put a ball of clay underneath your lid to support it. So keep that in mind if you're having any issues. I know I won't have issues today just because my piece is so darn dry. But once I have this trimmed to my liked thickness, then I'm going to take my serrated rib, I'm going to get it wet, and I'm going to create slip on top of my lid. Once this is nice and scored up, I can take a little ball of clay. I'm going to roll it into the shape of a dowel, and I'm going to press it in to that lid as tight as I can. I want to make sure I can see that slip coming through the seam. This will help it be very well attached so you're not having that knob pop off. So I press down. I can tell right now that I have way too much clay. So after I get this centered, I'm going to just pinch some of it off. Don't be afraid to take too much. Same thing as with that lid. It's always better to have too much clay than not enough. I'll get this nice and centered on here. You throw it just like you would a little mini pot. You put it on there, get it well attached, get it nice and centered, bring it up, and then right now I just pinch it off. There's my extra, put it to the side, and now I'm gonna regroup anything that kind of went out of whack from cutting that off, and then I'm gonna open. So I'm gonna press one finger right down the center. I want to be able to fill the lid at the bottom. Now if you leave clay down there, there's a good chance that that knob will pop off. So go all the way down so it's bottomless. It just touches the lid. And so you've got your opening. And now we're gonna make a couple little pulls. And then once I'm happy with the thickness of this, then I'm gonna start bending it over. You can see that my left hand is flipped upside down and I'm laying the rim right across to my hand. This is gonna really help keeping it nice and stable so it doesn't flop. You can also tell that my knob is a little bit bigger, or it's close to the same size as my lid. Today I'm gonna trim it back, but sometimes I will keep it larger. I used to have a client and she had really bad arthritis, and having a large knob like this made it a lot easier for her to be able to open her jars. So keep that in mind. If your clients have some kind of a disability, the larger knobs really do help. So if you go too small, it just makes it a little bit more difficult. Now I have the knob, the size and shape that I want. I also had a little mess to clean up at the base there. Sometimes I'll get that, sometimes I don't. It just depends on the day and how messy I am. Oh my gosh, you almost got to see that being made twice. All right, now that my cat-like reflexes saved that lid, we can carry on to trimming the sugar dish. So here I am. I'm just going to get it nice and cinched into the Giffen grip. And I'm going to trim away anything that I would rather not have. If it's something where I've added weight on the base, which is generally the case, you want to remove that so your piece feels nice and balanced. Sometimes I'll go and I'll just do the little edge on the bottom, but most of the time I'll do a little skim across the whole thing to make sure it's all nice and smooth. So once I have that line of where I want to put my foot, I'm just going to go straight down with my trimming tool and remove it. And then I'm going to just kind of clean that up. Once I have that side how I want it, then I'm going to concentrate on the bottom. There's always a little extra clay there. Well, there needs to be extra clay there if you're going to add a foot. If you're not adding a foot, then you'll have it a little bit thinner when you threw it. So I'm going to remove that extra clay. Since this little sugar dish has a foot, I want to be able to make that pronounced. So I'm going to clean that extra clay up, and then I'm going to round my foot. The sides of that foot I don't want to keep at that right angle. Generally, after it's fired, if you have it really sharp edges like that, they just get sharper and then they're not as comfortable to hold. So I like to smooth that up. I like to put in my little stopping rings. I do this for a few reasons. One, I think it just gives it a really nice finished look. The other reason, it gives a spot for when I'm waxing. I have a perfectly circular ring around my piece so I know where to wax. And then if you have a really drippy glaze, that helps to keep that glaze off of the foot. Once it's done, I'm going to add my chop, and then I'm going to place my lid on it. I want the lid and the pot to dry together. So once I have my lid on there, then I'm going to cover it up and dry it slowly. Now I've got the creamer pitcher. A lot of times with this creamer pitcher, I'll use extender feet on that Giffen grip, and I'll put some kind of a pad down. But the rim of this isn't too wobbly, and so I'm just going to wedge in my sponge to keep the rim a little more even, so it's going to be a little easier to trim that bottom. I'm going to keep my hand in the center of the piece and try to keep it from wobbling too much. Once I have it a little balanced, I'm going to concentrate on that bottom corner just because that is where all that extra weight generally tends to be. So I'm just going to trim that up there. And then I want to make sure it's all nice and smooth and flows together nicely. So I'll go down a little bit and work my way up just to make sure I have it that shape that I want. Once I have the shape that I like, then I'll add those rings. I want to make sure that I put the rings on the creamer pitcher and on the sugar dish. If I only have it on one of them, then it doesn't look like a set. So I want to make sure they both have the same little details. So I'll throw 2 little rings on this little creamer pitcher because the sugar dish has 2 rings. Put your chop on there, and now we'll pull our handle. When pulling a handle, I try to always get fresh clay out of the bag. If you're using reworked clay, a lot of it doesn't have the elasticity. So new clay is always best. And then I kind of roll it into a carrot shape. I don't want it too big just because this is just one little piece that I'm doing. So I'll make it into this little carrot shape, dunk the clay into your water bucket, and make sure your hand is really wet. You're gonna focus on going from the top and pulling off of the bottom. If you stop at the end of it, then you'll get a bulge at the tip. So we don't wanna have that bulge of clay on the bottom there. So make sure you go off the edge. I go back and forth to make sure it's nice and even, starting at the top, going all the way off. Once I have the thickness that I want, then I'm going to lay it on a flat surface, and then I'm going to cut right up at the wider area, and I'm going to cut it off at an angle. I want the front of it, or what's near me, I want that to be a little shorter, and then I'm going to get the back part a little longer. Now I'm going to pick where I want it on the piece. I'm going to just dunk my piece in my water bucket because I need that edge nice and wet. Now I'm going to turn it. Generally I'll be doing this on a table, but I figured for this I would just do it right where I'm sitting. I'm going to score that part up that I had cut off, get it nice and wet, then I'm going to clean up my edge. I'm going to look and see where the spout is. I want it straight across from the spout, so I really concentrate on where the spout is located, and then I get the top nice and sealed, so I press in. And then I'm going to look at it. Before I touch the bottom, I want to make sure that it's straight. A lot of times when you're looking at it one way, you'll have it crooked, and you won't even realize it. So I like to flip it upside down. I like to look at the very bottom of my pot and make sure from the very center of the bottom all the way up it's straight. Once I have it placed where I want it, then I'm just going to press in the bottom. I don't score my bottom attachment ever. I just wet it. After it's attached, I'll clean it up a little bit, and then I just make sure it's the shape that I like. Sometimes you'll want to press down right at that top edge and just kind of push it out just a little bit. I don't want it too far away from my pot, but just far enough that your hand can fit comfortably inside. Once you're done doing that, you could leave it. It is done. But I always do a little thumb rest. So I will take a little ball of clay, and then I just roll it into a teardrop shape, and then I press in. I'm going to score it, and then I'm just pressing it to the top of my handle. This is just a little added embellishment. It's not something that needs to be there. It's just an added little detail that everybody loves. So happy throwing. If you have any questions, please reach out. I'd love to answer them or do a video on something you've been wanting.